Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of My Life. Tonight's guest is WesleyGW. Role reversal again. Friday you saw me on her channel, tonight you see her on mine. So, and for everybody that's wondering, this is a weekly show. Each week we try to have a guest on it who is willing to talk a little bit about their lives before they became resellers. And for everybody that's wondering, this is a weekly show. So, and I was saying, well, I pulled your stunt. See, you forgot it last week, Friday. Didn't forget. I remember tonight.
I did it too. I had to go push pause real quick.
So tonight, Wesley will be telling you a little bit about her life before she became a reseller. And before you do that, Wesley, want to remind everybody who you are and stuff like that.
Okay, I am WesleyGW, and my channel is Get Real with WesleyGW. The actual YouTube is just WesleyGW though. But I started on YouTube several years ago, and just as a fluke, one of the videos I posted one month was about eBay Power Seller gives away tips, and that's pretty much how a lot of the videos have come after that, is about selling online in general. And that's actually how Chris and I ended up connecting, was in that way. And so I've been on a couple of times as a guest with my, you know, if you want to call it expertise or whatever, tips and tricks and things like that. So it's exciting to be invited back again. I'm excited for that. And honestly, I'm a little bit apprehensive. I'm not nervous or scared or anything. It's just, I normally don't talk a lot about, you know, my history and stuff like that. I'm more about empowering people with any kind of tools I can give them about, you know, having a business online. So this is going to be a little bit different for me. I do tend to yammer a lot. So if y'all have questions about whatever I'm saying, you know, ask questions. So don't feel like you can't do that. So, but I'm glad to be here. So.
Well, yeah, I have a comment before you get into your life. Chad, Golden Finger Picker, says, stick around, Wesley. Why do you have to come just as a guest?
Well, thank you very much. And I intend to do better on that. It's just, I'll be really honest. I'm bad on keeping track of everybody else's schedules when they're doing stuff. And Chris is really awesome about always posting links and stuff in our community group inside of Facebook, and I just clue out sometimes and I don't make it over. So I will try to make a better showing in the future. So thank you for inviting me in that way.
Well, with that being said, I'm not seeing any quick questions beforehand. I don't normally do questions on this show. I let the guests tell whatever they're willing to tell, how far they want to go. And if there's any questions that you don't want to answer, we'll just not answer them.
Okay, sounds like a plan. So I guess I'll just go ahead and launch in. So as I get started, I want y'all to pay attention to just kind of, you know, the rundown, the bullet notes of what my life is, because from the outside, if you saw the list of everything and all my qualifications and background and history and everything, you would think, why did she end up having to sell online? Because I grew up in Dallas, Texas. I was born in 1968, and so I was a 70s baby, and I had the blessing of having two parents that stayed married. I never saw them fight or argue. We lived in the same house my whole life until I was in fifth grade, and then we moved. And that was the house that my mom moved out of 2 years ago. So I did not move around. My parents were a stable couple. I did well in school. You know, I was in leadership positions in school and everything. And the first time I ever experienced a garage sale or anything, it was early elementary school, and I just, my mom held it along with a neighbor. And I remember being a little kid thinking how cool it was, because for some reason as a child, I had this infatuation with the old cash registers, which weren't old at the time, but y'all know what I'm talking about, where you like literally pushed in the $1 round key and the $1 little metal thing popped up, and then you do the 50 cent or whatever. So I had like this infatuation with cash registers, and And I always played store. You know, a lot of kids played school, and I would do that, but I liked to play store. And so that was just always kind of in my brain as a kid. And I actually even had my own little garage sale. It was kind of funny and kind of pitiful because I wanted to have garage sale again, and my mom wouldn't do it. My dad wouldn't do it. And I was like, well, I'm just going to have one. And they were like, well, okay. So I made a little sign and posted it, you know. And of course, I had like one little table with about 10 different little items. And so I remember a couple of people coming and driving and looking and driving by. And then one or two people came out and bought something. And that's a memory that I'll always have. So, and that was in elementary school. And then growing on up into through middle school and into high school, my mom was really into, she liked to go to junk stores, thrift stores, antique stores, secondhand stores, things like that. And went a lot up in Arkansas where she was born and raised. There was some really great places up there to shop. And so kind of got the bug in that arena as well, you know, buying older things, saw the quality of those older items and that you just couldn't find that in that current market of the day. And so just kind of grew up through all that. And then, of course, that was when the big push was antique malls. You know, y'all remember that, the antique malls in the 80s and 90s, how they were such a big thing. And so that's pretty much where I got my first real experience in that was during, it was either my junior or senior year of college. I can't remember. My mom opened, you know, a space at a mall. And she was very fearful and very trepidatious and everything. And my dad and I were the one that's saying, Mom, open it, go, you know, do that. It's good. So we finally encouraged her to do it. And, you know, that was, again, that would have been right there in the very late 80s, early 90s when that happened. So that's my experience through that way of just the secondary market of goods in general. And so fast forward and jumping into during high school, and up through college, I dated the same person and ended up getting married to him. And that actually was, it was one of those things that as he was younger, I thought, oh, well, he'll grow out of this behavior. He'll mature out of this behavior. And it actually just got worse. And so we got married in 1990. And I had to move out one time in 92 because of the abuse and the violence and the, you know, just the whole situation was not good. And then, of course, me being the naive, gullible little girl that I was at the time, in 6 months' time, he changed. So we got back together. And by 1995, I'd had my son, or I was pregnant, I should say. And it's actually a miracle that my son is here because by all intents and purposes, he should not be here. And I had actually decided to leave my husband again before I realized or, you know, found out that I was pregnant. So then I found out I was pregnant. It's like, oh, good God, you know, what is this all about? So tried to do everything I could, you know, to make that situation work. But my son was born in November of 95. And by May of 96, I moved out. Basically, my husband left for work one day. I called my parents. They came. We packed up stuff and we moved out. And I went and I lived with my parents for about 4 years. And this is all leading up to me getting into the selling online situation. So again, just kind of to reiterate, my whole background was perfect and textbook and shiny and merry and joy and all this kind of stuff, you know, the Leave It to Beaver kind of family. And then to have just the horrors of an abusive relationship that I had to deal with. So obviously that, you know, is a big knock to the self-esteem just in general. But there's a lot of other stuff in there about that situation, but I'm kind of skipping over that to get to, you know, what caused me to start selling online. So this was in, like I said, I moved out in 96. And so my son was barely 6 months old at that time. And history lesson for everybody, eBay started in like 97, 98. And PayPal started in like 99. And so you have to think about the timing of everything there. And I lose track of when exactly different things happened, but I do know at one point when I finally was kind of recovered from everything with the horrible divorce that went on way too long. And this was probably in, I'm going to say it was in 98. It could actually be 97. It could have actually been when eBay started, but I just kind of heard, because I was one of those early adopters of internet. So I was there with the dial-up, you know, and when it took, you know, we had no pictures really, we had no video, we had no graphics per se, you know, and that was me. I was online and I was doing stuff, and I heard about this thing called eBay, and it sounded like it was put forward as being an online garage sale. And I thought, well, I like garage sales, but how on earth can this work? There's no way this can work. You know, it was kind of one of those disbelieving things. And just kind of as fun as kind of a thing that I would see, hey, can I do this? Because of course, as y'all know, at the end of the 90s, that's when the heyday of antique malls and stuff were kind of dipping a little bit. And my mom forbade me to do flea markets. That's a whole nother topic on a whole nother episode. But yeah, I couldn't do flea markets or anything. So, you know, I was like, okay, how can I make some extra cash here? And I got onto eBay, and I can't even remember what the username was at that time. But you know, I got on eBay. This was before, you know, again, before easy upload of pictures. This was before PayPal. This was before there were any kind of safety things in place of scams or getting scammed or you being a scammer, you know. This was before discounts on postage, you know, that you got as being a seller. So this was what I called the wild, wild west of online selling with eBay. And I did pretty good. I actually made some really good money at that time. And I started sourcing kind of just from, you know, I'd mentioned it to people. And of course, with eBay being a new thing and everybody's like, oh, you sell on eBay. That was kind of cool, you know, back then, because nobody did it. And they were like, oh, well, I have so-and-so. Do you see if you could sell it? So it was almost kind of like a game that people wanted to play, but they didn't want to play it themselves. And so I would, you know, sell for other people, or I would buy their stuff outright and then I would sell it. And so again, that was, you know, the late 90s in that situation. And so bringing us into, let's see, it would have been the late fall of 98. And again, remember, I was living with my mom and dad with my son. And so my son was about 2.5, 3 years old at this time. Well, in the span of December of 98 to December of 99, my mother got diagnosed with colon cancer, had to get surgery done. I think that was in February of 99. My father was trying to fully retire from the company that he had worked with. And I was encouraging them to travel because for some reason in May, June of that year, after my mom had healed, they were talking about travel. And I said, well, then y'all, you need to do it. You just need to go travel now. And they didn't understand where the urgency was that I was telling them. And then in September of 99 on Grandparents' Day, my father had a seizure and fell in the home, you know, that we were kind of celebrating in, and ended up breaking his leg. And we took him, you know, obviously to the hospital, and the doctor came out and he said, well, good news and bad news. The cancer that he has in his brain didn't come from smoking. And we were like, what cancer, what brain, what are you talking about? I mean, this was like a total shock to us. So my father seizured in September and he died by January of that year. So basically all of 98 to 99 was like kind of non-existent. You know, I was basically running the household for my mom at that point in time. And actually the fall of that year, right before my dad seizured, I had met the man who would end up being my second husband. and that was a whirlwind romance. I thought, yay, you know, here's my happiness is finally coming, you know, and all this kind of stuff with this second husband. So we ended up getting married. It was awful now looking back in hindsight, but my father died January 4th. He was buried January 7th. We got engaged January 14th. We were married February 14th and moved out from my mom. So, I mean, it was like the most disregarding, most, you know, again, looking back, typically in the textbook, you can totally see that I was acting just in robot mode. I was not really making wise decisions or anything. And so I thought this guy loved me, you know, but again, that's a whole other topic for a whole other time. But with him, I had stopped all business endeavors that I was doing because that's what he wanted. He wanted me to stay home and run the household and, you know, raise my son and not have to worry about anything. And, you know, just be able to go through life and be happy and all this kind of stuff, you know, and he would take care of me. And that's what I'd always wanted. For those of you who don't know me, that was like my big dream in life, was to be a mom and be a wife, you know, and I wanted to have 5 kids, and I was going to make the cookies and, you know, have the birthday parties and make the Halloween costumes, the whole 9 yards of being, you know, a homemaker. So I was like, finally, you know, my dream is coming true. And again, we got married in February of '99, and in the span of about 18 months, everything just fell apart. And in hindsight, I can totally say without exception that I realize now the man, I made the mistake of letting him come to my parents' home and seeing all the perceived wealth that we had. And I think he was just an opportunist, and he thought, hey, you know, her dad is dying. I can swoop in here and say all the right things and do all the right things. And I can, you know, convince these stupid women to give me money, you know, talking about me and my mom, you know, these stupid women to give me the money. Well, when he found out that we had more, and I'm going to cuss here, so y'all be careful if you're from my community. I think he found out my mom and I had more shit in our necks than that. And we were like, yeah, no, that's not going to work, you know, because just because we're women doesn't mean we're stupid, kind of thing. And so, like I said, within the span of 18 months of us getting married, things just started falling apart. And then if you remember, my first husband, who was the abusive and controlling and all this, it was only worse during that time period. He would just horrible things to my son, horrible threats to me, physical threats, you know, physical violence threats. He sued my second husband for no good, literally no good reason. And it was just a very tumultuous, very, you know, traumatic situation. And so it was February 29th of 2002. My second husband and I were leaving. We were going out for our date night, and he was angry because my first husband was an hour and a half late to pick up my son for visitation with no reason, you know, no calling saying that he was going to be late or anything. Very much a game player. Y'all know the dynamics probably of abuse and things like that. So he was the stereotypical one. And so I will never forget, we were driving down the road ready to go, and he was getting mad and angry at me, my husband. And I looked at him and I said, what do you expect me to do? I said, I cannot physically make him get in the car, you know, put his foot on the accelerator, drive him over here and make him get out and come get my son. I said, you know, I can only do what I can do, and I'm trying the best that I can. And then he turned the car around, took us back to our house, and just started packing up his car with his stuff and started screaming and yelling at me about how I was awful and no good and all these horrible things, and how I had broken every marriage covenant that there was and all this. And so immediately in my mind, I'm going, I've broken no marriage covenants. You know, I haven't had an affair. I haven't lied to him. I haven't betrayed him in any way. I haven't gone against his wishes, you know, or anything like that. And I have a Christian background, so anybody that doesn't understand what I'm saying, it's all based in that Christian context of what a Christian marriage is supposed to be. And so he moves out. Long story longer, come to find out he had been the one having the affair. So during all this time that the marriage was on the rocks, you know, almost from the beginning, now I'm finding out, oh, that's why, because he had been having an affair. So of course, for months before that time, he was not happy, obviously, which brings it back to probably a day and a half after we got married. I say that tongue in cheek, but to get an idea of time frame, you know, there's the deal. So, you know, divorce proceedings are happening or whatever, and I'm saying, no, we don't need to do that. Let's go to counseling and all this kind of stuff. And I was trying to, you know, to fix it in any way that we could. He, again, moved out in February, and we were divorced by, I think it was May. So from like February to May or something like that. I'm just reeling because on the one hand, I have my first husband who is on the phone, in my face, at my house, at my son's school, threatening my son, threatening me, you know, trying to manage that. And on the other hand, I have a man who was the sole income for the house, leaving the house. And when he left, he took every bit of money that we had. He demanded to have the checkbook. And of course I went and got it and gave it to him. I'm like, well, here, you know, and he wrote himself a check for every amount of money that we had down to $200. Now you have to understand, the house that we lived in, we didn't live beyond our means by any stretch of the imagination, but we had a mortgage, you know, we had bills, you know, for the house and all this kind of stuff that we had to pay. And at that time, we were making anywhere from $20,000 to $50,000 a month where we were. Now, don't get too, impressed by that, because a lot of it was paying off his debt from the past, and we were giving a lot of it away to charity, which, you know, willingly so, that wasn't a problem. But, you know, he wrote a check for himself. It was over $7,000 out of the checking account, and that was all the money we had except the $200 that he left in there. And so in the midst of all of this, he leaves, and the next day, of course, I'm reeling and I'm sad and I'm upset, but I'm like, I've got bills to pay. I've got a child to take care of, you know, so I didn't have the luxury, I call it that, the luxury of just sitting back and doing nothing and, you know, crying in my beer, as it were. And so I thought I better get my butt in gear and do something. So I again, not being materialistic in any way, I started looking around, and it was like everything I looked at in the house, all of a sudden it had dollar signs on it, or at least cent signs. And it was like, I could sell that lamp, I could sell that TV, I could sell this sofa, I could sell, you know, this table, I could sell these boxes of food that I haven't opened, I could sell these canned goods. I mean, it was like everything started having, you know, numbers on it. And so what I ended up doing is I had an estate sale, and this is how, you know, the Lord protects those who follow him truly, in my opinion. And where I told y'all he took like over $7,000, but not $8,000. And 2 weeks later, when I had that estate sale, I made almost $9,000. So not only did God return back to me what had been taken, but he returned back even some more. Now understand, as y'all know, once the inventory's gone, there's nothing else to sell, you know. So I don't know if it was that action or whatever that again intrigued my estranged husband at that point in time, because he called one day complaining, saying, well, I've paid the mortgage, blah, blah. And I said, well, you know, you really should have called me about that, because I've paid it too. So I hope that, you know, you can call them or whatever and have that put on the principal instead of a regular payment. Well, he was just shocked, and he wanted my accounting of how did I pay for the rent. And I told him I sold stuff, you know, I sold things that were mine. And I think that shocked him, because in his past experience, every woman he had ever met was a gold digging, you know what, and was just materialistic and out for money and stuff. And I think he had thought that I thought that way about him, but yet when we got together, you know, I said that when he left, we were making anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 to $50,000 a month. Well, when we got together, not 2 years before, he was barely making $3,000 a month. And it was because of my contacts and my effort and my encouragement and us starting a business together that we were able to make that much money. Needless to say, as a little aside, I'll let y'all know, he is now married yet, but again, a third time. He is barely making any money, and every company that we had built up is now no longer even a thing. So kind of, I know that's awful, but kind of, pat on my back on that one, that I did do the right thing in that case. So where did that put me and my son, right? So we're fast forwarded again. This is like 2002. And we moved out. We were told we could stay in the house. We were told we were going to get the house in the divorce. And then he comes and he says, no, you have to move out. So I'm not one to be confrontational and to fight, because again, I'm not materialistic. And so my son, I was able to move us literally, it was like not even a block and a half down the street into an apartment community. So my son wouldn't have to, change schools. And so moved in there, and then it started getting a little bit, oh, good Lord, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Now, I had done eBay, y'all remember when it first started, and then I dropped everything. And then I thought again, looking at all this stuff, I had to move. And I was like, okay, I got to sell this stuff. So I started another, again, on eBay in 2002 under the current name that it is now. And in 98, about the time that I got out of it, or I didn't hear about it or something, but I never got connected with PayPal the first time around. But the second time around, I got PayPal, because obviously it was tied together with eBay in like 2002, 2003. And so I was like, okay, that was an easier thing. And it was nice because as soon as somebody paid, and y'all know the drill, it's like as soon as somebody pays, then you kind of have to wait a little bit until you're cleared and approved. But then after that, if you've got that little debit card from PayPal, as soon as somebody paid, the money was in your account. The money was there, and you were like ready to go. And so that was a dream to me. That was a dream come true. Now y'all have to understand, not having a lot of money, DSL had come along at that time, but mama ain't got no money to pay for no DSL. So in our apartment, we didn't have, I think I had telephone. I know I had a cell phone at the time. I think I had a home phone. We did not have TV. We didn't have computer. We didn't have anything. I didn't have a camera that you could, a digital camera. So I would have to get enough money to buy film. I would take pictures, and then I had to have enough money to have the film developed. And then I had to take the developed pictures to Kinko's, and I had to pay for them to scan it onto discs until the nice person there taught me how to do it. And then later they let me use the scanner stuff there at Kinko's for no charge, because they, found out my situation. So God blessing there. So who was I at that point in time? Now let's flash back. I was raised, mommy and daddy loved me. We never moved. I made A's and B's in school. I was involved in activities. I was in leadership, the whole thing. And here I am, basically, I have nothing. So, but what I did have was gumption, as my dad called it. And so I was like, okay, this is what it is. And I would go to the public library, and I would sit at the computer. And I think at that time we got an hour and a half time on a computer before we had to, get up and possibly leave. But we at least had to get up and go to a different computer. So I would, again, taking the pictures on the film, having it developed, scanning it at Kinko's, taking the floppy disk to the library, sitting down, getting on there and uploading and doing pictures, to list on eBay. And that is what I did. That is how I got started. Now, when we moved from that apartment, and this was in Carrollton, Texas, when we moved from there to where we are now in Austin, that was about 10 years ago. And leading up to that time, and after we moved here, money was even tighter. I was getting just enough to like pay rent and get food and pay bills, and then there was nothing left. So when we moved, when we got here, we didn't have, I didn't know where the libraries were, because it was a new town and the whole deal. And I had a job that brought me down here. And I was in that job for less than 90 days before my first ex-husband found out where I worked and contacted my employer and was talking to her and lying to her and telling her that I was stealing from her. It was an interior design company. And so he was saying I was stealing her clients and I was stealing money and all this kind of stuff, which of course was not anywhere near being true. But if you know anything about abuse, you know, textbook. And thank God, again, good people in good places. The employer at that time was such an idiot that she had her bookkeeper in her office when she would be talking to my ex-husband. And that bookkeeper knew that I was a genuine person and was not doing anything horrible. And she told me about it. And so, needless to say, I ended up getting fired from that job. And so again, here I am in a new city, can't move in with mom, no job, no friends, no community structure, no church membership, no nothing. And my ex-husband was being just heinously horrible to my son, having to put him on a flight back to Dallas. And sometimes he wouldn't return him. Sometimes he would call me during visitation saying I would never see him again, saying that he was going to kill him or that he was going to take him and they were going to move, and, you know, just all the horrible things. So having to deal with, you know, this, for a small word, the stress that my son was going through at the time. Again, went back to good old eBay, and I uploaded pictures with a dial-up connection. And I remember it sometimes taking 30 to 45 minutes to upload one picture to eBay. Oh, and a lot of stuff in between that period of time and where I am now. During that time, I got into YouTube. Hello, YouTube. I love YouTube. I love that I got to meet Chris, and a lot of y'all that are here putting comments, you know, the only reason why I know y'all is because of YouTube. I'm thankful that I was so bold and such an idiot to think that I could do a daily vlog every day in 2012. And so I did. And in February is when I posted the eBay Power Seller Gives Away Tips. And that one just went crazy. I don't even know how many views I've got on it now. I want to say it's about 300,000 if I remember right. It could be even more at this point. But that's where it all started, because in that video, I don't even tell my story. I don't even tell the story at all, but I kind of, in another video, it was like, how did you get started selling online? That was kind of thing. And it was just kind of a vlog. And I think I was just very basic about, you know, well, my ex-husband, you know, kicked us out of the house, so I had to make money. It was very short and succinct, but for whatever reason, the words that I said, it brought people to me. And I've been able to teach and help and train and give tips, and just like Chris does, you know, of this is how you can do it. And so with my story, it's like what I like to tell people, you know, urgent need trumps all excuses, all excuses. So when my husband took all the money but $200, and I had about $2,500 in bills coming up in 2 weeks, I didn't have a choice. Even if I had gotten a full-time job at that point, I still wouldn't have had money for those bills. When I got fired, you know, under total false pretenses because of an abusive and an ex-husband that's just, you know, all in our business. That's an urgent need, you know, so urgent need trumps excuses. Another thing is you do what you have to do regardless. When I moved out when my son was an infant, I went to my parents and I told them that I was going to be moving out, fully expecting that they were going to disown me, coming from a Christian background, you know, because that was going to be like a mortal sin, was to get a divorce. And my mother was pretty much that way. And my sweet, God bless him, rest his soul, father, after I said my piece, because I'd already had a job lined up and an apartment, and it was just kind of like I was just informing them. My dad was so sweet. I'll never forget. He leaned back in his chair and he did this and he said, well, sweetie, have you ever thought about moving in here? And I remember looking at my mother, and she had this look of, oh, hell no, on her face. Side note, my mother now that I realize she was who trained me to receive abuse without question. So that's, again, another topic for another time. But, you know, my dad, it was just something that a woman needed to hear at that moment, feeling so vulnerable with an infant and, you know, no ability really to take care of herself. And it was an answer to prayer, but I knew it was going to be a problem because of my mom. And it was. And we lived there for 4 years when my son was an infant. I didn't want to do it. I hated every minute of it, but it benefited my son. And so that's the whole thing, is that I did what I had to do regardless. So I did what I had to do of living with my parents because it was going to benefit my son, even though I didn't want to. I started selling on eBay a couple of different times because I had to, you know, and that one job that I told y'all that the ex-husband called and got me fired from, that's not the first time that it happened. And so, like I've told my community many times, that's why I don't look at traditional jobs anymore as a viable option for me, because every traditional job I've had, he's gotten me fired from it, or it's gotten so much to the point that I've had to quit just because of that interference when we were married, and when we were separated, when we were divorced, and even up until not too long ago. And so that would be another thing. Another thing I tell my community members is adapt and change or die. And so it's like, even with all the, you know, the eBay situations, like at first there was no PayPal, and then there was PayPal, and I could, you know, list easily at the library, and then I had to list via, you know, a dial-up modem, you know, the whole deal. So it's all different, but again, I had to adapt to it, and I had to change my mindset, and I had to make sure that I did what I had to do. And as a result, I've learned stuff that nobody can ever take out of my brain unless they give me a lobotomy or something. The knowledge and the experience and the education I have, nobody can take away from me. And so it has been able to, like I said, I've been able to share and help other people with that too. Also, because I know a lot of people in the online selling community are there because they have to be, or they can't do a traditional job or whatever. It's not always the great stories of, you know, people making $10,000 every day and they're happy as a lark. You know, sometimes a lot of online sellers, it's like any other job, we're barely scraping by a lot of times. And so that's why I say don't accept failure as being final, because it's not. It's temporary. Whatever problem that you're facing, it's just temporary, and you don't have to, you know, you don't have to focus on that. So going back kind of a little bit past the time when my son and I first moved down here to Austin, and I had the job, and then got fired from the job, and then I started listing on eBay and things like that. It was still extremely tenuous because I believe that my first husband thought I would automatically move back to Dallas. But I thought, and that was a whole situation too of me fighting to get free from Dallas. I actually had to represent myself in court because no lawyer would represent me. They said, you'll never get free from Dallas County. No one ever gets free from Dallas County. You can leave, but your son will have to stay in Dallas County. And I wouldn't take that as an answer. And so I literally represented myself in, you know, family courts in Dallas, Texas, Dallas County. I'm not an attorney, and I don't play one on TV, and I definitely don't suggest you do that if that's your situation. That's not advice I'm giving here, but I'm just, again, trying to tell you, when you know, you have to do what you have to do regardless of the situation. So, you know, we got free to move down here, was down here, had the job, got fired from the job. And so I think he thought I was immediately going to move back. And I thought, you know, in my mind, I'm like, hell no. You know, I got free from you. There's no way I'm going back into Satan's den. You know, there's just no way I'm going to be facing that again on a daily basis. Because in my mind, my son he was older now, and he could start telling me some of the violence and abuse that he was experiencing. One of the ones that most vividly crushes my soul even to this day, he says he remembers being short enough that he barely could see up over the side of a bed. So you can think about how old a child would be at that time. And his father called him into his bedroom, and he was in the bed with his current girlfriend at the time. And he looked at my son and he said, well, Michelle has something to say to you. And so my son tells the story. He says he looked at her, and Michelle went off and just started telling him, this little baby child, how she, and I'm going to get emotional, how she hated him and hated children. And if she could, she would kill him. And then she went into detail about how she would kill him. And this is what my son endured. And now y'all have to understand is that all during this time, I'm letting judges know. I'm letting court officials know. I'm letting child psychologists know. I'm documenting things. I'm turning stuff in, and people are still saying, well, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Because I was trying to get visitation supervised or something, to save my son. That was the whole thing, because I could see his entire demeanor being picked away. He was changing from this happy child into this, aggressive, mean, sorrowful, isolated, kid. He didn't bond well with friends here. And the pivotal moment came. Now, and I'm telling this part because I want y'all to understand that during all this turmoil with my son, I was still trying to sell online and still trying to, do odd jobs that I could, to do what I had to do. But this was when my son it was summer of his 8th grade. I think that's right. No, summer of 7th grade going into 8th grade. He came home from visitation, and it was a couple of weeks later, and we were just talking, and this again is indicative of abuse. If you've ever studied children of abuse or how they do things, it was like we were having dinner, or we were doing laundry. It was some just inane thing, and we were just talking about stuff. And he just looked at me. He goes, Mom, this summer my dad tried to kill me with a gun. And so I wanted to do that. And I thought, okay, thank God, I had that voice in my head that said, remain calm, just ask him what happened. So he was 12 at this point in time, and that's the magic number. For people that don't know about children in court cases, at 12 is when they can really start, I guess they believe a kid, at 11 and 364 days, the kid, you can't believe them, but all of a sudden at 12, they're believable. So he detailed this story about how he was playing on the computer, and his father pulled out a gun from the safe, and which was right there in the same room as the computer. And he said something to him, and my son turned and looked at him, and there was a barrel of a gun right aimed at my son. And he said that the look on his father's face was like the devil. I mean, that's literally how he described him. And he said, bang, you're dead. And he pulled the trigger. And the gun was not loaded. So, or I should say, my son didn't die. Now, we don't know, was the gun loaded? Did it misfire? Was he just, pardon me for being crass, was he just dicking about? What was he doing? But again, the conversation that transpired led my son to think that he was literally going to die. And when I asked him, I said, what did you do? He said, I just turned and looked back at the game because I didn't want the last thing that I would see would be his face, because he thought he might pull the trigger again. And so to have your child come home and tell you that after you have fought for their freedom and fought for their peace, and all you ever wanted to be was a mommy that protected her children, and you're failing at that. And again, I understand no fault of my own. I get that. But in the same vein, I felt like it was fault of my own. So at that moment, he and I, my son and I, talked back and forth a little bit more. And I said to him, well, Connor, I said, are you ready to face him? Because we knew there had been other incidents before that we wanted to go to court and to get, freedom. So for whatever reason, that was the pivotal moment for my son, where he was like, no more. And so again, as God would have it, he just brought the right people to me, and praise to God in heaven above. I did not have to spend one penny on the court proceedings at that time. I was put in the right county in Austin, Texas, that they have a different view of how they look at women and children of divorce than they do in Dallas County. My ex-husband got the pompous ass lawyer that thought he could come down and tell everybody how it was going to be. And basically, long story longer, all the tricks that worked in the past didn't work anymore. And I was connected with the people who could make a difference. So why did I tell that big, long story? And what does that have to do with selling online? Trying to tell you that even if it's a challenge right now, even if your sales aren't good, even if you've been an online seller and then you've walked away from it for whatever reason, life goes on, sales come and go, you know, it's not the end of the world, but you have to look at, have you put in your full effort? Because times like that, I didn't put in my full effort, obviously. But then when those times were over, I did put in my full effort. But if you look back at everything I've shared tonight, every little step, even though it was like literally going through hell with my back broke, every step that I went through taught me a skill, gave me more confidence, connected me with the right people to where when it really mattered, and to quote one of the counselors that talked to my son, if we hadn't gotten free at the time, he and I both would be dead today. My son and I both would not be here today. And this is from, you know, a mental health expert talking about the abuse level and how it just kept increasing. So now when that happened, you know, the gun incident and the going to the court, the result from that judge was supervised a visitation. And my son was heartbroken and he was crying and he was fearful and the whole 9 yards. But as the experts knew, in real cases of abuse, when there's supervised visitation, the abuser will not do visitation. So my son has not had to see that sorry son of a bitch since that court time. He never had to do one supervised visitation. So am I happy that we had to go through that? No. Am I happy that I had to have 2 failed marriages? No. Am I happy that I had to live with my parents for 4 years? No. Am I happy that I had to resort to selling online for a career? Not really. But I've looked at it from the standpoint of all that I've learned from it and all the experience that I've been able to gain from it. And not only was I on eBay, and I'm still on eBay. I don't have anything listed, but you know, I'm still on eBay. But it's grown into things like Etsy. It's grown into things like Amazon. And from those experiences, it taught me about online marketing, you know, and online sales from a bigger picture. And so from that has grown building, you know, a community on YouTube, building my social media platforms, connecting with people like Chris, connecting with people like y'all, hearing y'all's stories, getting motivated, being able to share those with other people and teach other people. And to me, that's the biggest thing. So of course, I would love to hear all of y'all's stories, but you know, we don't have the time for that. But everybody has a story to tell. And you're in the situation of being an online seller right now because that's exactly where you're supposed to be. So whether you're making $10 million a day or whether you're hardly making $1 a week, you're where you are because you're supposed to be there. And so I always try to look at, I'm the perpetual optimist, even with everything that I've gone through. And I think my community would attest to that. I'm the perpetual optimist that you can always learn something. You can always find some good to learn from horrible situations. And again, everything that I've gone through is led me to where I am now. And so I don't only sell on eBay or Amazon or Etsy or Craigslist, but I also do online courses. You know, I teach people about websites and how to, you know, build a website for free and all this kind of stuff. And what are keywords and marketing tips. And, you know, so it's just one of those things that everything grows on each other. So I hope I haven't freaked everybody out so much, and I hope y'all got some kind of coherent understanding of my life before online sales, and then when I got into online sales, and then, you know, kind of where I am today in that. So that's kind of the end of that. So what do you think, Chris?
Well, I know I'm looking at a lot of the comments, and a lot of them say your exes need to get beat up, all the usual stuff you would hear.
Of course. And I know that y'all are speaking that from a position of love, and I appreciate love for me and my son, and I appreciate that. So.
And I didn't see any questions popping up. So if anybody has any questions for Wesley while we're here, go ahead and ask.
Yep.
I'm sure she'll answer whatever. And if she can't or isn't willing, she'll tell you.
Yep. I'll say like my cousin says, none ya. It's like none ya business. If somebody asks a question and you don't want to answer it, you just say none ya.
And while we're waiting to see if there's going to be any questions, I want to thank you for coming on. I know it wasn't easy for you to do, but I know how since I was on your show, you felt it was fair to do it.
Yeah.
And I also want everybody to know Wednesday night and next Sunday, Northeast Picker is going to be back on the shows, or at least on our show. He's going to be back as a co-host, at least for next week. And then the 11th, he has something going on. And he will be the guest doing his life next week on the 8th. So look forward to that one.
There you go. And if y'all haven't heard Chris's, I'm sure you probably have, but if you haven't, take a moment to go back and watch Chris's story, because it's like I shared. He was on the show with me on Friday, and that, like I told him, I said that was when I saw his story, because I kind of knew his situation. But when I saw his story, I was like, holy moly, what am I complaining about? You know, really and truly, even with all this that I've shared with y'all tonight, in my mind, I'm still thinking, what is my excuse? What is my excuse? Because that I went through was in the past. It's part of my experience, but it isn't my today. And Chris deals with stuff today that he's always going to have, you know. And I'm like, you know, that just, I don't know. It's the beauty of social media and internet and YouTube and all that kind of stuff, that we can connect with each other on these kind of levels. So Sunflowers and Pigtails said, how is Connor doing now mentally? We're both survivors. He does not like to take at all and say that he is a victim of domestic violence or a survivor of domestic violence. He's still in that mindset of that makes him weak. He, in my opinion, as his mom, he's a little bit stunted in some areas, but in other areas, he is like more mature than 70-year-olds that I know. So it's a very, very dichotomous situation that he's in. The beauty of it, though, is that he's fully conscious of it. He's fully conscious of, Mom, I just have a hard time dealing with, you know, XYZ. Mom, I just don't have the tools to know how to blah, blah, blah. And so even now, you know, he's almost 21, for those of y'all that know. On some things, like right now, we're dealing with things that I should have dealt with when he was 12. Like the rebellion and the, Mom, you're so stupid, and all that kind of stuff that like preteens go through. He's just now experiencing that. And so, like I said, he's leaps and bounds ahead on some things, and he's a little bit stunted on other things. But overall, we're all about forgiveness. And forgiveness doesn't mean you have to go back and be best friends with your abuser. He gets that. And he also superimposes it on, you know, if we had not had certain things happen, he wouldn't have had a good relationship with members of his father's family. And he has some really good relationships with that. Oddly enough, because I fostered those. Because just because one person is an idiot doesn't mean everybody is, you know. And so that was a real different thing. So far so good. And he is he's still working on stuff, and probably will be for a while. But he and I, we do a lot of talking, and as y'all know, a lot of members of my community, y'all see our relationship. So it's a very intimate relationship. he and I have of our thoughts and our emotions and our feelings and stuff like that. So
yeah, I was gonna say for the people that don't know, like a lot of my viewers that might not watch you all the time, he's known to walk behind you while you're doing one of your shows, and everybody says, "Oh, paperclip sighting."
yeah, paperclip sighting. Yeah, yeah. And he's a really, he's one of those guys. He's, if you were to meet him and didn't know his story at all, he's very easygoing. He's friendly. He jokes. He's silly. Stuff like that. So that's all a good thing.
And please thank him for allowing you to give out his story, because I know you didn't. You asked him if it was okay
Yeah.
first.
Yeah, and I asked him again today, actually. I told him, I said, okay, this is what's going on, and I'm going to, is it okay that I tell your story? And he's like, I don't care. So that to me is a good thing. And he wasn't saying it like blowing it off. He was like, it is what it is, and, that's the thing. And now a lot of y'all may know or understand why he wants to be a teacher. Those of y'all from my community, my son wants to be a teacher in public schools for that exact reason. He wants to be there in case there are kids like him, which there are every day, that he can help, because there were so many times he didn't feel like anybody believed him. He didn't feel like anybody was there to help him, and he wants to make a difference in that way. So again, having good come out of bad, that's what life is all about.
So, are there any other questions for Wesley before we close up for tonight? And Wesley, I'm sure there might be something that might want to do a couple minutes hangout after the show if you're willing.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I have no plans. I'm free as a bird. I have no husband, no boyfriend, and my son can take care of himself. So I can do whatever I want to do. That is the beauty of being a single parent. So.
Well, I know that I have a couple of people that usually pop in after the show. So
Yeah.
some of them might have missed what we talked about earlier. So they might want to rehash it, or may want to go deeper and then
Oh,
you
sure.
are willing to go on here. So
Oh yeah, absolutely. And anybody who it's a given, but anybody who's here that wants to connect, Chris is in my community. His wife is, Sean is, Cool Toads, and there's a lot of other names on here that are recognized. So come on over to my channel, youtube.com/WesleyGW. Come to Facebook, WesleyGW. Come to the group, WesleyGW, and that's where you can connect with me and with my community members over there. So,
well, the YouTube link is down below in the description, so that's an easy way for them to get to you there. Let's see. They're still talking about what everything that goes through. Mountain Stars, I think that's what it means. It says, you have gained strength from each other. Very inspiring story.
mm-hmm. Thank you very much. And that is the one thing, that is, again, not to get all preachy here, but I'm a firm believer. God is my protector. My son is here because God wants him to be here. And all the bad stuff that happened to us had nothing to do with God doing it to us, but he walked us through it. And on this side of it, we are stronger people for it. So.
And my wife's reminding us, says, remember, there's a leg.
Yeah.
Well, she just got to the point where you're talking about your son wanting to be a teacher.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
Otherwise, a lot of people are saying thank you to you and good night and all that. So.
Well, I just thank y'all again for, letting me come over here. And I know there was a lot of comments that went through, and I was able to catch some of them that I was watching. So thank you, everybody, for your support and love and kind words and words of let's get them. Even those, even though we're not going to act out of it, still makes me feel loved, in that way. And
I want to thank everybody that watch. I mean, I usually do a couple of shout outs, but since we were all engrossed in what you were saying, I didn't want to interrupt you and do shout outs. So let's see. Okay, well, I guess they're all giving thumbs up, so I don't see any more questions. So we will do a after show hangout. I will put the link below or in the chat, and I will also put it in the Reseller Society group. So if you don't get it in through the link, just pop in the group and you'll get to talk to Wesley. Well, I won't say one-on-one, but you never know. We might have 10 of us in here.
There you go.
Thanks again, everybody, for watching. See you Wednesday night.
Bye, everybody. Thank you for having me.